I'm so happy to welcome Shad to Q.
Good to see you.
How are you?
I'm doing great.
How are you feeling?
I feel good.
Yeah?
Yeah, just kind of getting used to these songs.
Yeah.
And yeah, I feel good.
How you feeling about being here? You feeling all right?
Oh, I feel good. Yeah. This is a new room.
Yeah, I should say if you're listening to this on the radio, we're upstairs.
Yeah. I kind of wish I could see the old room.
We
but
can go down.
Yeah, we'll go after.
I thought about doing this in the old room.
Yeah.
But the old room is taken.
With what?
I know. Lori Brown.
Oh, she's cool.
She's doing an interview with somebody.
Yeah, I like her.
So that, well, we'll give her a pass.
Yeah. Otherwise, we storm down there and kick whoever's in there out.
We'll give her a pass. But I haven't seen you. Well, last time I saw you, I think it was on the side of the road.
That's right.
And we were able to talk a little bit.
Yeah.
I was able, for the only other person in the world, I was able to go, man, this is all very, this is all very crazy.
Yeah, you were deep in thought, but it was good to catch up. And you were telling me about a Bob Dylan poem.
Oh, I sent that to you a little while ago.
Yeah.
How good was that? Hey?
That's dope.
Yeah, it was like
really
a Bob
dope.
Dylan poem.
Because I didn't grow up with Bob Dylan,
Right.
so I'm like slowly gaining an appreciation.
That was like a 9-minute spoken word Bob Dylan piece. I sent you,
Yeah.
too. It wasn't Blown in the Wind,
No,
but it was good.
that gave me a whole new appreciation for him because I couldn't quite get there
No.
before. You know what I mean?
Voice? Was the voice the problem?
Well, it's one of those things where, you know, sometimes the artist is really seminal, right? But other people, so, you know, their importance is their influence and how they sort of changed music. But if you go back to what they did in and of itself, now it's not necessarily quite as powerful.
Yeah,
right?
and some of that has to do with like nostalgia. Like, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
if I try to tell somebody that I don't like the Smiths or something like that, I'm not telling them that I don't like the Smiths. I'm telling them that I don't like them when they were 12 years old. And, you know, I don't respect that they were crying. You know, and that's not what I mean. I just don't mean it. Not crazy about Morrissey is what I mean.
Yeah. It's a Sloan lyric, though. It's not the band I hate.
It's the fans. Another great band.
Yeah.
But what you do know and what you did know is hip hop. And now you're doing this incredible hip hop evolution documentary.
Yeah.
Peabody Award winning.
Yeah.
How do you find sitting down with these people? Like these people you're Bob Dylan. These people you looked up to your entire life, I'm guessing.
Well, again, you know what it's like.
I guess.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you know, you sit across from these people and they're really fascinating, and their contributions, obviously, to the culture and the music that I love and has given so much to my life, you know, are remarkable. And then, you know, the cool thing, and it's the same thing I felt when I was doing, you know, your job, is these people are also stunned. They're as stunned as you are by them. They're stunned by what they've been able to, you know, contribute and be a part of. So, yeah, they're super, super fun conversations. Interesting.
But they're just people, hey?
They're just people. They're like,
that's the big revelation for me on this show.
Yeah. They're just people. And, you know, you're like, wow, so that's amazing. You know, you were 12, you were, you know, trying to figure out a better way to play break beats, and you ended up changing the world. They're like, I know. It's crazy.
Yeah.
You know? They're
yeah.
equally stunned.
Yeah.
So in that sense, yeah, they're absolutely just people.
Have you had any moments of? Can you name me one particular moment of like, wow, I can't believe I'm here right now?
I mean, the one I'd have to say stands out the most is Kool Herc, who's kind of recognized as the father of hip hop, and we had the opportunity to interview him in front of his building in the Bronx, where he grew up and where he kind of famously started throwing his parties in this particular style that, you know, became hip hop. So that was very surreal. He's not a guy that's very public. He doesn't do a lot of interviews, you know, so to be with the guy that basically started hip hop at the place where he started hip hop, you know, and look at the building and speak to him and hear his story, and then kind of gaze out at New York and the world, and it all moves to the beat of this music that he, as a 13, 14-year-old, pioneered. So
I gotta think that some of this, like getting to talk to either on this show or in Hip Hop Evolution, like getting to talk to some of these great minds must have impacted this new record somehow. No?
The weird thing is only indirectly, but not in the sense of like gleaning anything from their like musical genius, oddly enough. You know, if there's anything that impacted this record, I think it's kind of the experience of meeting so many people and meeting them in these particular situations like you and I are in. But I mean, we know each other. So, you know, when you sit across from a stranger, for example, and just that dynamic of, you know, you're coming with whatever you're coming with, however you're feeling that day, whatever nerves you might have. They also are nervous because they're about to be interviewed on the radio, you know, in front of the country or whatever. And that energy and what we bring and our posture that we bring to social situations, to economics, to political conversations, that is basically what this album is about. So very indirectly, well, not necessarily indirectly, but not in the way that people might think that these experiences have impacted the music, but they have impacted the music.
It's not like you hang out with Grandmaster Flash, so the record sounds like Grandmaster Flash.
Exactly.
It's not like that, but
Exactly.
but all these things, yeah. And
But it does, like, it's a very unique kind of experience to meet so many strangers and to, yeah.
Because I always think that the other person is super cool and confident, or strangely aggressive. You know what I mean?
This is what the album is about.
Go ahead.
That's what the album is about. That, what's in your imagination about another human being.
So when someone comes in, and you know, when you'd be in the studio or you're doing Hip Hop Revolution, someone comes in and you haven't met him before, and they're kind of a big deal to someone you know.
Totally.
And you don't really know them that well, and nor do you know their art that well.
Yeah.
And you are scared a little bit.
Yes.
And they seem a little, I don't know if aggressive is the right word.
Well, I mean, before they walk in,
I imagine the worst.
You're bracing yourself for the worst. And a lot of the album is about why.
And why?
Why?
Do you have an answer?
Well, fear, you know, like, like this question of, is it all illusory? Because it is. Because how many people come into the studio to talk to you that are strangers, and you're bracing yourself for the worst? How many of them actually attack you? Or like 0%?
Yeah, like almost nobody.
Yeah, virtually 0%.
Yeah.
So then why do we approach each other with
Jim
that?
Cuddy one time, I had to kick Jim Cuddy out.
Yeah, I mean, he's a horrible man.
Yeah, he's throwing whiskey bottles at me.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, it's about that. It's about that fear, and like, why do we approach each other with that posture? And not just each other, but, you know, the album is also political in a sense. Why do we approach, you know, our politics and, you know, our financial situations also, like with that kind of posture of either defensiveness or aggression?
Yeah. Why is our default when we meet another human often? Well, often it's going to be nervousness because we haven't met someone before.
Yeah.
And
why?
then because we don't necessarily think the best of people all the time.
Isn't that weird, right? We tell kids, like, don't talk to strangers, they're going to murder you. Do you know a murderer? Probably not.
I know one murderer.
You know one?
I know one murderer. I do know. I went to school with a murderer. It's a true story.
So you know one.
Yeah.
You know one,
but he was very nice.
Right?
He was very nice.
He's not going to murder everyone. He probably murdered one guy, you know?
He was very nice.
Yeah, exactly.
He was a kind, just stole money when I was a kid, but he was a lovely guy.
He murdered one guy.
You got to cut this part out, or I am going to get murdered by this guy. No doubt about it, without a shadow of a doubt. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. So
I don't all the time. If it's a friend of a friend, like if your friend was coming in, if you texted me and said, Tom, you know, my friend Arthur is coming in.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, oh, well, I'm probably going to, you know.
Yeah. I mean, there's no murderers named Arthur, but I know what you mean, like in general. Yeah, like a friend of a friend. Yeah, so there's that like level of trust there. But yeah, that's a lot of what it comes to. I mean, I don't even answer my phone sometimes. I don't recognize the number, and I think they're gonna kill me. Why would they call me first?
No, they wouldn't. They wouldn't.
Right? But yeah, so you know, I'd say at bottom the album is about fear.
Why a concept album at all? Like, why not a song about this?
Because actually the first thing that grabbed me was this concept was basically a story that appeared in my imagination. And right away, I started to see all the parallels to our world. So that is really, it's the thing that inspired the whole album. So that's why it's a concept album. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, I actually like to be a little bit more plain spoken and to the point. But
it's been a while since we heard from you at all. I mean, the Tony Braxton record, but before that, it's been a while since the last. How long has it been since the last Shad record?
Last Shad album, last rap album was like 5 years ago.
So did it feel like a bit of a risk to come back with a kind of a grand concept record?
Not really. I mean, in the sense that like it felt like the most inspired thing that I had within me to make. I started recording a whole bunch of different songs, and a lot of them were very, very different in tone. Like, I wanted to make Bill Withers type music, you know, music that just makes you feel so good. And I made some songs like that. But at the end of the day, this was the project that was coming together the most clearly, the most quickly, just felt the most inspired. So
you told me about it when I ran into you on this side of the road. You were coming back from basketball, and I was deep in thought, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
You told me about this record
Okay.
in a way that was a little bit of, can you believe this, Tom? Like
Really?
you did. You were
Yeah.
kind of like, I was like, so what are you working on? You were like, well, I got this one record I'm working on, which is kind of a normal record. And then I got this weird poem I wrote about a war. Like you didn't, you said it like that. Like Like you seemed like you were even a bit surprised.
Yeah, I think I was probably still in a phase of like, this is what I'm working on. And I trust you enough to tell you, but I don't even know if I'm going to finish it because it's strange.
It's great, Shad.
Thank you.
It really is.
Thank you.
Like it's and I want to talk a little bit about it.
Yeah.
I'm talking to Shad right now about his album, A Short Story About a War. I'm Tom Power. This is Q. It's a pretty slick transition.
That was smooth. Yeah,
Thank you very much. One of the things you do with this concept album is you have to kind of get in the mind of a bunch of different characters. It's almost like an opera. So I want to go through the 3 core characters with you. The first line we hear on the record, which is what we're going to hear on one of the songs, is I wrote this poem about clever men and our violence, and it starts out with this young boy that wakes up on the desert floor, and all around him are the sights and the sounds of war. And now that particular image, that's the sniper, right? Who's the sniper?
Yeah. So the sniper is a guy I kind of saw in this war scenario, war world, right? And the sniper, as you can imagine a sniper, he's elevated. He's in a higher up position, which gives him security, which makes him relatively safe, which gives him power. But at the same time, I imagined him feeling a sense of disconnection, a sense of loneliness. And right away in my mind, I was like, oh, this kind of parallels if you imagine people who are higher up, metaphorically speaking, higher education, higher status, higher income, they also enjoy a situation of like relative safety from the problems of the world. They also enjoy power. They also might participate in the violence of the world, but from a colder, more calculated distance.
And they can do more damage. They can do a lot of damage.
And they can do a lot of damage. And then to extend the metaphor further, this sense of disconnection also from, if you're higher up, from the ground, from the soil. Like a lot of us that are affluent living in cities feel a disconnection from the soil, or from the common, person's experience. So right away, that character was very rich to me in like metaphors and parallels to like our world.
This was the first one you thought of. This is the first character.
That was the first character to sort of, emerge in my mind. I imagine this kid waking up on this desert floor, kind of realizing everyone's running around, there's bullets whizzing overhead, and then, coming to learn, well, this is the world. It's a desert and it's a war, and so eventually he learns how that whole thing goes, and he becomes a sniper.
Obviously, I have so many questions about like the kind of the real world ramifications and parallels, but I want to go through the characters here for people listening. The stone thrower is the
stone throwers one? Yeah, so that's another, so I imagine this war world and all these factions are fighting, and one group that came to my imagination was called the stone throwers. They throw stones at people, they bludgeon people to death, which is crude, and it's an ugly, brutal kind of violence. But right away, again, I saw this metaphor there for powerlessness, basically. So by that I mean like.
So you can't hear me.
Yes, Tom is squinting, trying to understand.
That's my perpetual state.
So like by powerlessness I mean they're in this war world. People have more sophisticated, more powerful weapons, and they just have stones.
Right.
So I say in the song, they're vilified by all sides. Everyone hates them because the violence they do is ugly and brutal and crude. But the reality is that they do that because that's the only power that they have.
And when you inhabit the stone thrower on this record, I mean, it's a very angry Shad.
Yes. Yeah, I was imagining that position, of powerlessness, that position of justice deferred too long for people. And what that feels like, and then imagining somebody from among that group who just sort of has this burst of, emotional and intellectual clarity where they can talk about all of this, you know, injustice in the sense of powerlessness. That again, like, just had to me very clear parallels to our world.
Well, that's what I was going to say. With saying that the sniper is those in more privileged societies, those who are able to be relatively safe, those who are able to do some damage, but in a more cold and calculated way. Where do you see the parallel with the stone thrower?
So a lot of the lyrics there talk about, you know, to me the perspective I imagined was young and oppressed.
Right.
And that rage that comes from the powerlessness of being young, of being oppressed. So you can imagine, you know, those people in our world, they're vilified. You know, let's say, you know, you're young, you're involved with the streets, you know, like, people don't like you. In general, we're like, that's bad, and we look down on those people, and we look down on their violence. But it's you know, in some, if you look at the rest of the violence that happens in the world, economic and otherwise, military, people do way more damage, ecological damage to the world. And so there's a hypocrisy in our vilification.
How was it for you to inhabit these? Like, how did that affect you? I know your records really well, and I had never quite heard you.
Well, you know me.
Yeah.
That's not where I'm at. That's not my mindset. Most times, it's not the space.
You're not a man of a lot of rage.
No, I'm not a man of a lot of rage. No. I don't feel a lot of rage. I have to meditate on this character to feel enough to deliver the song. So it wasn't very comfortable emotionally, and it was also difficult from just a performance standpoint because it's not natural for me. I mean, people that know my music know that that's not usually my character, my musical persona.
Was it exhausting or was it liberating?
It was a fun, creative challenge.
Yeah.
But it was a challenge. You know, that's definitely the outer limits of my performance, you know, abilities. Yeah.
So maybe the closer to you, I thought when I listened to it, is the fool, the third character, and I mean that with utmost respect, of course. You know what I mean. I mean, if you're listening to this, you just heard what I said. It'll make sense in a second. Who's the fool?
Yes. So it's all very bleak what we've been discussing so far, right?
Yeah. People have left.
You and I are both pretty bummed out. Kind of want to go home. So I'm imagining this, you know, this scenario, and people are fighting, and they all have their rationalizations and their reasons. And then I imagine this guy in the midst of all of it, and he kind of bends down and he picks up a bullet off the ground and just kind of smiles. He's like, is this what everyone's running away from? These can't hurt you. You guys know these can't hurt you, right? So
Thomas squinting again.
Thomas squinting again. Yes. So I started to think about what that meant. And again, it started to appear, you know, very clearly to me what that represented, which is like, we were talking at the outset about fear.
Right.
And basically that's his sort of perspective is it's fear driving this whole thing.
I understand what you're saying. Bullets alone, a bullet on a table can't hurt
No,
you.
he's saying you guys are like running from these bullets, but like if someone fired this at you, it wouldn't hurt you. It wouldn't kill you. If this hit you, it wouldn't kill you. You're so scared and you're running around and you're shooting back, but why? These can't kill you. And so he doesn't carry a weapon and he walks around. So yeah, so that led me to kind of pause and think about, oh yeah, like what if the way we participate in the world, our posture towards each other, this defensiveness, antagonistic thing that we were talking about earlier, and you know the same way we think about our money too, the way we kind of might hide that or use it to do harm, or you know, the way we participate in conversations, you know, the way we approach our politics. Like, what if it's motivated by fear, and the fear is like it's illusory, you know? It's so that was an interesting, you know, kind of thing to occur to my imagination.
This is a person who comes in, sees the conflict.
He's there in the middle of it.
Cuts through it and says, this is really about nothing.
Guys, this is about nothing.
Right.
Like, what are we afraid of here?
We're all...
So, or maybe he's crazy. He's about to die. You know, maybe he's an idiot.
Is it you?
No.
This character's not you.
No. Again, it was just like, I'm just seeing this world, and these are the people kind of popping into it, and right away they're making sense to me on some level. So what that person is to me, what that character is to me is very interesting possibility for peace, radical kind of peace. And I'm not necessarily talking about physical violence, but I'm talking about these kinds of like a deeper kind of violence that we've been talking about in terms of like, how we approach one another. Am I making sense?
Yeah, and I'm gonna break a.
You can tell me if I'm not.
You are making sense.
Okay.
I'm gonna break a bit of a rule
Yeah.
because I try not to tell people what I interpret from their work. But when I was listening to it, two things that occurred to me, and I'll tell you the first one. I thought with the sniper and the stone thrower, so the person in a position of privilege who can still do an awful lot of damage, the person is ultimately powerless and therefore full of rage and can't really do anything. And the person who wants to cut through it all and say, what are we all fighting about? I feel like not just me, but we all sort of inhabit. We all can inhabit each of those characters
Absolutely.
at any given time.
Yeah. So you just summed it up a lot faster than me. Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much it. You know, so at the end of the day, it's almost about an internal conflict, right? And like, you know, these are all sort of feelings and
For you?
Yeah, absolutely. Enough that I can voice them all, right? Like enough that I'm in touch with them and I can write them and perform them. So that means they're somewhere in there.
That's really beautiful.
Yeah.
It really is.
No, thank you.
How are you feeling about not the actual act of like, you know, touring and doing all this, but this is a lot of really heavy things to get out.
Really heavy.
Even just doing this is complicated. This is a lot to talk about.
I know. And I feel bad about it, to be honest with you.
Why?
Because as I said, I wanted to make a Bill Withers album. I wanted people to feel good.
And I felt really good listening to
Okay, cool. That's like really important to me. And that was part of like the fun creative challenge is like, how can I make this exciting and ultimately, you know, touch people, you know, in a good way and not just be draining.
When I was listening to the record, I kept on thinking, is the Fool, again, all of us, is it Shad or is it Jesus?
Yeah.
Like that's where I went.
Yeah, that's cool. You're doing my job for me.
I went
really well of explaining this whole thing.
But because there's a strong element of spirituality on this record.
Yeah.
The line that stuck out with me is, it's hell on earth anywhere love isn't present, which is what a pastor says to the fool in the song, right? To the young boy in the song. And which is a pretty actual strict definition of hell. Biblically, right? Like if we, as you and I both know, if you drill deep into the Bible, the hell's not some place with a pitchfork and fire and someone in a suit. It's a place without love. And then elsewhere in the same song, you know, we let the creators create and we let the creator judge. Did this feel like you were? And but please only talk about this if you're comfortable talking about it.
Yeah, totally.
Was this an intentional, or what was this decision like to kind of reveal maybe a more spiritual side of yourself? Yeah,
I mean, it's a spiritual record. You know, as we were saying, like ultimately these characters exist within us, you know, and I say towards the end of the album, you know, I guess the moral of the story is the war continues within us, you know, like this is a struggle. And so as much as there's like political resonances and all sorts of stuff on the album, I think it's a spiritual album. I think having the perspective and holding on to the perspective that's required to live peacefully. And by that, again, I don't just mean in terms of physical violence. I mean in our posture towards one another. That's a spiritual thing. And, you know, if I'm able to, you know, find that fool character and that character's voice and wisdom, to me, it's through something spiritual. You know, that comes from my spiritual, you know, education, through people, through religion, you know. So yeah, absolutely. It's a spiritual album. And
well, that's the reason I said that this record ultimately, you were saying, I don't want to bum people out. The reason this record will ultimately made me feel good, and I think it will make people feel good, is because, I mean, joy with no adversity is hardly joy. You know, there needs to be darkness in order for there to be light. And if we get ourselves mired only in darkness, we're sad all the time. But if we're able to find, I mean, this is me speaking from an extremely privileged position, but if you're able to find joy, then joy is a little bit more beautiful. Like the Fool character check comes out at a really
Cool.
Nice time in the
Cool.
record.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean?
I really appreciate you saying this, Tom, because as I was saying, like that's one thing I'm a little nervous about is it is a dense album.
Yeah.
And there's a lot going on, and it gets dark before it gets light on this album.
I hope. I mean, so you're about. Can we break some news here?
Yeah.
You're gonna be a daddy.
Yeah.
How you feeling about it?
Great. I don't feel conflicted about it. I feel great.
Why would you?
Yeah, I know. I feel good. I feel like I'm excited.
Everyone feeling good?
Everyone's healthy so far, and so I feel fantastic about it.
Are you? I mean, there's obviously a parallel between a lot of the stuff we talked about today and the world we're living in right now. You know, there's that line. I think it is maybe even be a psalm. The darkest hour is just before dawn, and it can feel like we're in an incredibly dark place right now. Sometimes, how are you feeling hope-wise about bringing a youngster into the world?
Oh, I feel good.
Yeah,
I feel good.
You worried about the world this child might be coming into?
Well,
that's a bit of a dark question, but
yeah, no, I feel good, Tom. It's like creativity, whatever, is like it's like a powerful act, and it's like it's a hopeful thing to do.
Yeah,
it's a hopeful thing to do, whether that's making this show or making music or bringing new life into the world in some way, is like it's a hopeful thing to do. We're resilient and we're strong, and I have no reason to think my child won't be resilient and strong.
And you get to show your child,
yeah,
the beautiful world.
Yeah, then the child will be amusing. It will amuse me. You know what I mean?
Put on the kettle for you.
It will fetch things.
before we turn the microphones, we were talking about.
Like all of that is good, but no, but like that's it. I think that's the next generation. They're gonna see the world as it should be, and they're gonna make it better. And so that's like I'm excited for that.
I think that again, I think that joy without adversity is sort of a cheap joy. And I think that miring only in the sadness is cynicism, and there's nothing worse than that. Mm-hmm. And what I love about this record, Shad, is that just when you think it might be a cynical record, it becomes joyful.
I appreciate that.
It's nice having you in.
Oh, thanks for having me, man. It's great to do this.